The Samsung Galaxy A73 has a 108 megapixel camera just like their ultra flagship phone the S22 Ultra, but the megapixel number of course tells you a very small part of the overall story. So today we are going to test if the cameras on the A73 can keep up with the big boy S22 Ultra. So this is the first shot and both phones seem to offer very similar level of details, so let's zoom in. The A73's image looks slightly more exposed, so we have slightly more details on the tiles on the S22 Ultra's image, but the other areas look very similar. We again see similar detail levels in this other area, with the difference being mainly of exposure and saturation. Now let's switch to the wide-angle camera comparison, and it is a similar story here, with the difference being mainly of exposure and saturation, because even after zooming in, we only see slightly better details on the S22 Ultra. This is an image where we are seeing some HDR processing and the zoomed out shots look similar, but when you zoom in, you will find that the S22 Ultra is able to preserve the details in the shadows slightly better. Switching to the ultra-wide camera here, we again have similar images, with the A73 having a more colder and bluish tone while the S22 Ultra has more of a magenta shade. Zooming in, you will find both the images looking very similar, with the A73 being a little noisier than the S22 Ultra. Next up is the image of this car, and zooming in, you will find that there is very little difference, with the S22 Ultra looking slightly more natural because of the processing that the A73 does to its images. The A73 keeps exposing the leaves a bit more than S22 Ultra, but otherwise the level of details is very similar. Now let's check out how these phones perform in portrait mode, and the A73 is a little more exposed again, but if you zoom in at 200%, you will find that it is a little noisier too. The edge detection on both of these phones is totally on point. Now let's check out an example from the macro camera, and while the A73 has a dedicated sensor for the macro camera, the S22 Ultra achieved this with the primary lens with something called a focal enhancer. The result is that both the cameras can produce good macro images, but if you look at the corners, the dedicated camera on the A73 will give you better sharpness, while the S22 Ultra is more saturated and more exposed in this particular image. Here is an image of some flowers, and while the S22 Ultra's image may look a little better, the A73's image seems to have preserved more detail in the flowers with its more controlled saturation levels. Here's a low light shot taken with night mode, and these are again very similar images, with the A73 being a bit more exposed. Lastly, here is another very similar looking scene, but if you zoom in, you will find the S22 Ultra to be slightly less noisier. Here is our last example of a low light shot, and zooming in, we are seeing the A73 being slightly more noisy and exposed, and here the S22 Ultra is able to offer better details if you zoom in. Moving on to the front cameras, here is a selfie that I took with the front camera on these phones, and these both look nice. Interestingly enough, I got a sharper looking result on the A73 in one example, while when I compared another selfie which looks less flattering, I found the S22 Ultra to produce a sharper image. Do give this video a thumbs up if you are liking it so far, and you can also subscribe with bell to check out my full review of the A73. Coming to video, the S22 Ultra can shoot in 8K, but for this demo we are shooting in 4K only, and here we can see how well the OIS systems of both of these phones have been working. And interestingly enough, the exposure on the S22 Ultra seems to be higher this time in the video. Let me know how much of a difference you feel there is in video. So overall, the cameras on the A73 are able to compare quite well to the cameras on the S22 Ultra, and when they say that it is like a flagship, it is kind of true, and the number of 108 megapixels is not a gimmick. The A73 did have a tendency to expose the images more with a colder tone compared to the S22 Ultra's more magenta tones with less exposure, and the S22 Ultra also had more saturation in its images, which made them look better in majority of cases, but one could also argue that A73's images looked more natural. The A73's images also look a bit too processed sometimes in comparison, but the results are still very close on these two sets of cameras, and considering how the Ultra costs more than twice as the A73, you are getting a really nice set of cameras on it. Of course, the S22 Ultra has other extra lenses like its telephoto lens and its periscope lens that can really zoom into things very far away, which is really a technological achievement, but the A73 also offers more than just a basic camera setup with its wide angle and the macro lens. So well, that was it for this quick comparison. Do give the video a thumbs up if you liked it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.